And George is joining us here. Excellent. Yay.
Hi.
All right. So welcome to all that are here. Welcome to those that might be listening to this at some later point. And welcome to Carrie Lake and Kim Helen for joining us today on this adventure, because that's what it is. I think I was lying in bed one night about 3 a.m. and this idea went, why don't we just have a conversation? Because we'd had some conversations that had no agenda before with other people. And it was like the most amazing things came out of those conversations because there was no agenda to get to. There was nothing to get to in the end. And in that came so many nuggets of wisdom. So that's where this sort of all came from, is those one of those 3 a.m. thoughts of like, oh, let's try this. So thank you, ladies, for stepping forward. And we each have two questions to bring to the table. We'll all answer them and let's see where it leads us. So I would just give a moment or two for each of you to introduce yourselves to each other. So Carrie.
Thank you so much, Linda. I'm Carrie Lake, and I'm just north of San Diego. How do I introduce myself? Oh my goodness. I'm in that moment where there's a million things I could say, and then it all blows away in the wind. So I'm just honored to be here with you. I'm honored to be one of the authors for Equine Leadership Magazine. And my website, carrielake.com, shares a lot of wisdom and guidance for assisting humanity to reconnect with their heart and live with an open heart. And that takes on lots and lots of different forms, essentially whatever's necessary. So I'm happy to share with you guys and look forward to where we go.
Awesome. Thank you. And Kim.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So I'm Kim Helen. I think I know most of you know me, but I'm outside of Charleston, South Carolina, and my business is called Unbridled. And what I do is kind of eclectic and kind of evolving all the time. But the underlying theme of it all is that I support people and horses, I guess, sometimes more indirectly the horses, but support people in disentangling ourselves from a lot of the expectations, pressures, judgments, both external and internal in the domestic world, so that we can reconnect with our more organic and authentic selves, which is usually realigning with nature and the natural order of things. So that's kind of what my business is about. But I'm just so excited. I've written for Equine Leadership too, and hope to be writing for this next edition. And I'm just excited to spend an hour with Linda and Carrie today, and everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, both of you and my friends. Again, my name is Linda Watson. I probably know me through Equine Leadership. I have a business called Horse Touch Life Design, but I spend most of my time on equine leadership. And then out of equine leadership stemmed this Humanity Needs the Horses. Just last year, when the pandemic came along, it just felt like humanity needs the horses. And that sort of hashtag is sort of taken off, and it's just, it is what it is. So we're going to do these questions. We don't know what the questions are, but we did start with, I did send out one question, just sometimes it's easier to sort of get the ball rolling. So the first question is, share a story of a moment or time when you had a profound moment or connection with a horse or a herd of horses, or however that may be. But we connect via story, so we thought we'd share that. So I would leave it, if either of you ladies want to go first, or you want me to go, however you want that to.
Why don't you start, Linda?
All right, I will do that. And that was it's having a question beforehand allows you sort of to go through, well, what about this time? Well, there was this time, but it allows you the space too to sort of allow other things to come in. And I've got one story that I tell all the time, but what's coming to me is another one where there was a purchase that a friend and I had made, and we bought 2 stallions and 2 mares from this woman that was selling her breeding racing business. I don't know why we ever bought 2 stallions and 2 mares, but yeah. Unfortunately, what happened is they died off one at a time. So if they, I'm not sure if they came to us to do that, but in the end, there was one left. But it was one of them specifically that it was a connection. It was the mare came in. We used to let the horses come into from the fields. They would walk into their stalls. They knew where their stalls were. We would let them come in. This mare, being fairly new, she came in and she slipped. So she tore some muscles in her back end, and it was soft muscle damage. So we were okay. She's fine, just some rest. I lived near the house and the barn were near each other, and one night somebody came running up and she was down. The mare was on the ground, but convulsing. Anyhow, she was on her way out. What happened, the connection piece for me came when I ran down to the barn, found this mare, put my hands on her, and I felt her leave her body. And it was this profound moment of like to feel it go through me and out, and she was gone. And it was, I cannot explain it. And it's like she had waited for me and I wasn't trying to do any healing on her or anything. I just went to her and put my hands on her. It was just a natural reaction. But to feel this, I can't even explain what it was, but I knew it was her that was just leaving her body. And it was just this whoosh, if want of a better word, it was this whoosh that went through and gone, and there was no residual effect or anything. But yeah, that's one of those profound things I can't even explain. But yeah, that was the one that sort of, I have others, but that was the one that just sort of jumped out at me for this situation, that just went, tell this story. So that's that one for me. So
That's amazing. Do you want to go, Kim?
Sure. Okay. So I was trying to decide between two stories also, and one of the ones was also a death story, but I'm gonna not do that one because I want to leave yours, which was beautiful as it is. So this other one is probably more appropriate anyway, because it's probably the story that had the biggest impact on my life, like actually changed my life with horses. And it was my mare Tempo, who is the only horse I have bred and raised from birth. Not really into breeding, but that's a whole nother story. Anyway, so this was back when I was still very much a rider and a trainer, and very, very into training. And she was going to be my dream horse, my eventing horse. But everything kind of went wrong from the very beginning with this horse in terms of one lesson is don't try to plan out somebody else's life for them, right? That's not a good idea. And I don't really think of myself as a control freak, but I was really quite invested in this vision of what our life was going to be like together. But one of the big things that happened with her as a yearling is she developed a coffin bone cyst, which she came up three-legged lame. And long story there about several vets told me to just put her down there. I consulted with surgeons across the country. It was at a place in her hoof where they'd have to go directly through the hoof wall to get to it. And they all said that, it was like a 95% chance that she'd get a hoof infection and have to be put down anyway. And half of the surgeons said she'll never be lame, never be sound, even to be just comfortable as a horse, let alone anything else. But my vet and I decided to give it a go with stall confinement. And she ended up having to be on stall confinement for, in total, almost 8 months. And this was just a very bad experience for this mare, who was very, very vibrant and enthusiastic and alive and had all kinds of control in her life, and then suddenly didn't. And then I had to go into the stall and give her injections and medications and things like that. And she didn't understand what was happening, and she didn't feel like she had any control. And she became very, very aggressive. And this progressed, and I really didn't know how to handle it. I was working at the time and needed to get things done in the morning before I went to work. I was obsessed with just taking care of her physically. And I really was not even capable, actually, at the time of being there for her emotionally. But fast forward to, she did heal. And I thought that when she could go back out with the other horses, that she would, the aggression would stop. It didn't, it got much worse. Long story, let me jump ahead again. Many, many years of trying to work through this, I finally learned that the way, it wasn't a training issue at all. I couldn't train this aggression out of her. Nobody could. It was something that needed to heal in our relationship. And we had made a lot of progress when I started listening and started letting her say no. And anytime she said no, I listened. And I had to come to terms with the fact that I had become an aversive in her life, and that humans were an aversive because of what we represented to her, which was a loss of control of her body and herself. And we had made a lot of progress. Meanwhile, through all of this, I'm in a really rough marriage, 17-year marriage that was just very unhealthy for both of us, very unhealthy dynamics. And I had been in marriage therapy. Things weren't really getting better. So I go out one day after a bad day at work, bad day, in my marriage, and I go out and I got a little bit of that old mindset of, I just need to have a good day with my horse, right? We've been making progress. I'm ready to start, we're going to try this next thing again. And I didn't push her hard, but I just had that attitude of, I remember exactly, I had my hands up and I wanted her to move away from the pressure, and I wasn't putting pressure on her. I just said, I'm going to just wait here until you move. Like, that's just as much pressure, right? I mean, I was like, I wasn't going to take no for an answer. And she reached around, and I still have scars, grabbed my arm, picked me up. I thought she was going to rip off my arm. She didn't, but she dropped me. And I kind of was right near the fence, and I climbed out of the fence because I couldn't believe I had triggered, this aggression again. And I was on the ground, like inspecting my arm to see if I needed to go to the ER. And I feel her head come over the fence. And I looked up at her, and she just had this beautiful expression that just said, like, I didn't mean to do that, but I had to. And what flooded over me in that moment was that my horse had more self-respect than I did. And that she didn't care who I was in her life. If I had raised her, if I was her human mother, whatever, if I didn't honor who she was and how she felt and honor her no, she wasn't going to take it. And it was a mirror of me in my marriage, right? Where it was the opposite. I needed him to take my no's. I needed to stand up for myself in that marriage. And I knew it would probably be the end of the marriage, but that was the day that I decided I wasn't going to take it anymore. But the other profound thing that came out of that was that I realized we all have the capability to play both roles. I had felt like a victim in my marriage, and to then recognize that I was playing the role he'd been playing in the marriage with my horse was hugely profound for me. So it was profound on many levels. So that's my story.
Wow.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Kim. Wow.
That's
Carrie.
amazing. Carrie. This story that is just, it's right here for me to share is actually about a giraffe rather than a horse. And when I was about 19 in college and floundering by all conventional standards, I had a mare with me at the time. Her name, she was like my best friend, she's my Dolly, but from human land, there was no support at all for me to be with her, and trying to navigate school. And all I really wanted to do was sleep in the stall with my horse. And that was frowned upon. It just was a really, really difficult time. And so I was home for the summer or something around age 19. And for some reason, our whole family went to the California State Fair. I was in a state of mind where everything I wore was like men's clothing, 2 sizes too big. So I was just covered in drapery and didn't really want to exist. And, just walking around that way. Even when I did get to be at the barn, I would do my best to be the only one there and not ever go when there were other people there, because it just, I couldn't feel anybody that could look at me with a hello instead of you're weird. And that was really hard. So, excuse me, my family was walking through the gates at Cal Expo, and pretty close to the entrance. And I'd never experienced this at, a state or county fair before. Somebody had brought 2 giraffes. There were 2 camels over here and there were 2 giraffes over here. And there's this big enclosure. And the 2 giraffes were down at that end with their handlers and people. And the way they had it set up was there was a tall fence, right where the giraffes were, and then a little bit of space and a short fence. So all the kids were supposed to stand behind the short fence, but the giraffes had space to reach over if they wanted to. And no feeding or anything unless you're with the handlers. So when I saw them, something absolutely magic, because I love giraffes too. They're just like, oh my God, the most beautiful things. And something just absolutely magic lit inside of me. And I was so happy to see them. It was like they were friends put there just to see me and say hello. And I went into a completely different space than my family or any of the other people. So I walk myself right up among all the little kids, and everybody's, no taller than my chest, really. And I just stood there and I looked over at the giraffes and loved them. Like I got to feel love, unadulterated, unhindered, full spectrum love. And one of the giraffes picked up his head and he looked over and he looked right at me. And I just said, oh, hi. And he's walking over. He walks over straight to me, straight across from me, and reaches straight over the fence. And I have no idea what other people were thinking or watching, because the universe consisted of 2 beings at that point. It was me and this guy. And he reached over and he picked up the end of my jacket and just started mouthing, and, no damage, just like mouthing and sucking on my jacket. And I was just rubbing on his face and going, oh, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So in that point in my life, yeah, that giraffe reminded me what love feels like. It was absolutely magnificent. I love those guys.
Thank you. All right. So now we've connected via stories. Kim, do you want to share the first question or the second question?
Sure.
Your first question.
All right. My first question. This is a doozy for a first question. All right. You ready? So I want to know, based on your direct life experience with horses, like in the totality of your life experience with horses, what do you each feel in your own hearts that horses as a species would like for humanity as a species to know? Yes, Carrie.
I may have thought about this a little bit in my life. To put it as succinctly as possible, it's 2 words, maybe 3. You're welcome. You are welcome here.
Wow.
That's what it's been. That's what they've shown me. Another way to say it, there's space here for you. We remember you. We see you. You're welcome here.
Isn't that beautiful? Wow. Linda.
Well, I didn't give me much time to think about mine.
No.
For me, it's not like that they necessarily have an agenda, for want of a better word, but it might sound like that. But the biggest message communication that I've had with them as of late has been, and it was, I went to do a meditation. I thought I was going to videotape this meditation. So I set up my camera on the tripod, two really quiet horses, went to stand with them, and the one horse, and I was standing beside a round pen fence, so the metal fences. So when you hit them, they sound loud, but they aren't really. So the one, I was standing between the horses, but the one horse came over and he nudged me against the fence. It sounded horrific, but it wasn't. But he knocked me, actually, I didn't know, he knocked me out of camera range. So then this became about, and I didn't know at that moment, but this became about him and me, or him and I. That was where this was. It suddenly became, it wasn't this whole thing I was going to do and show everybody. It became about him and I. And there was like 2 words. Again, it becomes short, but it was, well, 3, like, do you trust us? Do you trust us? And my tears flowed, and I was just like, yes, I do. You know, it's like, okay, well then trust us. And where it goes from that, I don't know. But for me personally, it was this, you know, it was trust us. And that, I think that's a bigger picture thing too. It's like, yes, for me to trust us, but yeah, just trust that we can. I hesitate because they're being horses. They're doing it by being themselves. They're doing any of this by simply being themselves. And in that message is, that's the message. You know, trust us by letting us just be ourselves and who we are. And what a beautiful message for humanity was, just be yourself. So that trusting us, that, you know, we can show you, but we show you just by doing nothing, or just by doing what we do and being ourselves. So that was yeah, that's a great question. How about you?
Well, yeah. So I guess my answer too is simple, but in a way it's kind of complex too. But the simple part of it is that I feel like the horses are saying that they wish we could see the potential in ourselves as well as in them, actually, that they see in us, right? And see beyond the kind of potential that we typically see in them, right? To all the different aspects of them that we haven't taken time to explore. And it kind of goes back to, like, we often hear a lot of us say, you know, my horse is my mirror. And we hear that on an individual level a lot. And I feel like one of the messages I'm getting from the horses, just from my journey with the horses, is that their species can be a mirror for our species in terms of helping us see. So horses are in a unique position in how closely they live with humanity for a species that's not a dog or a cat, right? Dogs and cats are domesticated in a different way. They like join our world. Horses are in our world, but they're not really living in our world the way that dogs and cats are. And dogs and cats benefit in a lot of ways from, you know, our trash, the other kinds of, you know, rodents and things that we attract to our way of living. Horses, if they're set free, I don't think would live in our same location with us the way that dogs and cats do. But so they're they live with us, and they're very intertwined with us, but they're still very much connected to their innate sort of primal aspects. And a lot of the dysfunction that we see in domestic horses it totally mirrors the dysfunction in humanity and in humans, right? And so if we can switch over to wanting to understand what's happening with our horses in the domestic world that are exhibiting all kinds of stress behaviors, right? Because of the pressures and the way that we're forcing them to live and the way we ask them to live, and we're actually doing all those same things to ourselves. And so I feel like this mirror of, if we can figure out and have empathy for what we're doing to them, but they're like, that's not enough. Like, it's great that you want to have compassion for us, but you need to then apply it back to ourselves. So it's like they're in a unique position to sort of, I don't want to say save us. It's not like they're there to save us, but I do believe everything in that, the natural way is that everything's interdependent. And that feels like one of the ways that maybe horses and humans are interdependent, and that this all is it's a rebalancing that's happening right now. So
Love that.
Beautiful. Wow.
Speaks about like you're welcome. The horses require nothing of us, right? They don't need us to be anything different than what we are. And so therefore you can show up in any way you want. You can ask any question. You can ask for anything. And the more, and this, like, they're as patient as they need to be. Whatever humanity needs to go through, horses have been right there saying, okay, how can I help? Okay, I'm right here, right? Whether it's in art or in pulling carriages or carrying interesting people into battle, whatever it might be, they're always like, okay, what are we doing? Okay, okay, right? And so in that way, it's like this idea of the mirror, I understand, and it's apt to get people to look at a reflection to help see themselves. But there's a point at which that analogy of the mirror, I think, starts to tune out the the uniqueness of the individual providing the mirror. And when we have the capacity, when we finally do have the courage to look at ourselves, and then also the capacity to see and welcome the uniqueness of another, everything, you just jump into a whole other realm of relationship and connection and listening, where you do really start to understand how it feels that you are welcome in your totality, however you show up. And the more you do show up, the more you'll get to see and navigate what actually is your natural expression and what is no longer serving. However you learned it, wherever the conditioning is, who cares anymore, right? It's like, let's walk toward the open space where everybody's heart says yes. And, I think all three of us are kind of saying the same thing with that. Do you trust us? Do you trust that we are this clear, this open, this welcoming, this spacious, and this absolutely exactly who we are? We're not going to compromise what horse is, but that is such a gift to humanity. So humanity can learn what it is, like your story, Kim, to not compromise.
right.
Wow.
Cool.
Ooh, we're gonna go deep today. Awesome. Okay. Then Carrie, thank you for that, Kim. Carrie, your first question.
Yeah, Kim, beautiful, beautiful question. So I want to ask this one. We'll see what you guys do with this one. Do young people today tend to feel a different connection with nature than older generations in general? Like, do people who are upcoming generations have a different innate connection with the animal kingdom and the horses than people, say, my generation and older? And if so, why? Like, what's that about?
Well, I'll speak. Oh, Linda, do you want to go?
No, if you've got something there, I've got lots ruminating. So
I don't know that it's different. I'm just thinking about, I don't have children of my own, but I work with I work with children in my program, and in my experience, I think, sadly, I think that there's a lot of children today, maybe more so even, I don't know, I grew up in the suburbs, but we were outside all the time. Like, we played outside all the time, and there was just more of a freedom of where we could go. There was more nature nearby for us. But I find that a lot of the children that come, and I work with a lot of inner city kids too, but they just haven't had the opportunity to connect with nature. But amazingly, it's right there. Like, their wonder and their awe and the connection is like, sometimes there's a little bit of fear, but as soon as I can, just hold enough space that they understand that my horses aren't going to come right over to them because I don't do food rewards or anything, that they can just share space, and not have this big animal right on top of them, the fear subsides really quickly. So I don't know that it's different, except I guess just in my experience, I do feel like they're a little less connected with it just in their daily lives, and maybe aren't having anyone lead them toward that. I'm sure that there are exceptions to that, but generally speaking, that's my experience. I don't know. Linda, what about you?
Yeah. So yes and no. That's we all bring something. We all have a different connection to horses. So we all bring our unique connection. So if we look at it as a bigger one, I mean, if we're working with youth tend to bring in the fact that their critical thinking isn't as maybe as strong as somebody as an adult. So the horses can assist them with their critical thinking. Yeah, and I bring this, that I had a young girl do an exercise with a horse once, and the horse was in a round pen, and the horse came in, and the horse was just like, up. And as soon as we brought the young girl to her breath and to the present moment, the horse immediately stopped, turned around, walked to her, and put its head on her heart. And the girl walked out, and we're like, done, mic drop. And it was, the girl came out of the ring and she said, I never knew how much my energy affected other people. We didn't have to tell her, we didn't have to say anything. Just by that exercise, she already placed it with humans. Like, she already took the lesson out of it and put it with, how can I relate this to my everyday life? And she's like, I'm going to remember that. And it was that nugget that she needed. So, that was that critical thinking. And I think at a younger age, there's things that horses can, those connections are a little different in that way, just because how their chemicals in their body are, and like how they're what they go through. Yet I've seen seniors go out to horses and the memories the horses pull out for them. Those old memories of being in the war, being with horses as a young child, and what that does, and those pulling out those memories that maybe were lost because they couldn't remember due to age. They couldn't remember things, and these horses have pulled out. So there's a different connection there. Whereas you get an adult that maybe's built up all these, like in our age range, like in between the youth and the senior, that's built up these walls, and the horses have helping them bring down those walls. So if I were to put something in each of those categories, then yeah, I think we all have those different connections because we bring different things to the table. But within each of those categories, we're all bringing more different things to the table. An adult might be more, more open, but we're all, when we bring it into the that was the yes. When we bring it to the no, that we're all the same, putting a hand on a horse, and somebody that's never touched a horse before, we all have that, often have that similar reaction of, whoa, something happens. It's magic. We don't, we can explain it by a little bit of science, but we can't explain it all. And it's that magic that happens, and that magic can happen at any age. So that's where that, to me, that there's that yes and no, because yeah, we can talk scientifically and all that, but yeah, there's magic in there too. And that happens. To see a senior with a walker be able to brush a horse that they haven't brushed a horse for 60, 70 years, and tears are flowing down their face because that memory's been buried for 60, 70 years. That's magic. So yeah, yes and no. There you go.
The deeper place where that inquiry is coming from is taking into account, like over the past couple of decades, on very broad spectrum, humanity is much more aware of autism, which is under this category of sensory blah, 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 sensory confusion, sensory clarity, different ways of looking at sensory connection. There's all the different awarenesses of synesthesia, and just, even in the equine assisted world, the rising of the somatic approach, not just with horses, but other therapies using body movement and body awareness and all that stuff. And that's been happening for a couple of decades. And so my question is sort of, curious how that ripples through consciousness. And as that is more pervasive in the general consciousness of humanity, are kids who are born going to have a greater capacity to sense these things without being taught, right? Or to seek out nature without needing therapy, without having first to be ill in some way. And so this is really the query, and maybe just opening a window for emergence, for more people to be open to noticing that as we go forward. Because I know there's also a pervasive attitude, oh, kids these days, that's always been there. And it's always confused the heck out of me. Like, why do people poo-poo kids? They just aren't listening. They don't know how to listen to that wisdom, the simplicity of that wisdom. So I think that's where the question was coming from, is, how available can we be to see a different kind of consciousness in the young people coming forward, so we can just look at it and go, yes, because to me, that's what the horses do.
Oh yeah, the horses totally see it. I mean, it goes back to that unbridling. Like the kids have less, they just come with a purity, right? They don't, I find that adults find it really hard to believe that the horses are going to be just innately attracted to them, or wanting to be like, the adults don't feel worthy, right? Or they're worried about, my energy is going to turn the horse off, or they're so worried about what is it that they're going to do that's going to not be appealing to the horse. And the kids just are like, here I am.
Exactly.
And the horses are like, yes, I want to know you, right? So that's one of the big differences I see. Whether kids are getting more that way or not, I think they haven't lost that, which is amazing. And I don't know, that kind of got me, you kind of triggered on something else that I was thinking about, a little related to the first question, which is, I used to think that as a kid growing up, I really thought that like humans were a evolutionary mistake, right? That the fact that we mess everything up and we're just so different than every other living being. And I was like, this can't be right. There had to have been a blip, right? This can't be correct. I don't really believe that anymore. And it's because of horses, honestly. And that whole interdependency thing. And I this is going to sound crazy, but I almost believe that in order for humanity to really step into our unique gifts, evolutionary gifts, in a benevolent way, in a helpful way, in a reciprocal. Sorry, did I mute myself? Anyway, for us to step into our role in the bigger scheme in a reciprocal and mutual way, I almost feel like we have to understand experientially what I don't want to call it darker side, because I think it's all just part of us, but these parts of us that we're using in unhelpful ways right now, not in service to the natural world or to ourselves, that we almost have to experience what the result of those are going to be in order as a species to say we understand that power and we're going to choose to use it this way, right? So I don't know that it's a mistake anymore. Oh, you're muted too, Carrie.
I'm back.
Hey.
I'm completely with you, Kim. People talk about doing the shadow work and looking at the darkness and all of that, and like, oh, that's excellent, but I don't like that darkness on that side of the planet, right? And like to really bring it into the gestalt and to really honor, like, what if we stop judging darkness? What if we if we really want to go beyond a duality, then I wonder how things exist if we look beyond dark and light and we just say, okay, there's dark and there's light, and what else, you know? And connection with the animals, you know, with the horses, man, it's so deep, and it still reveals itself more and more and more, the way the purity of their heart it continues to invite more awareness of the purity of our own heart. And yeah, humanity is no mistake. It's just been some misunderstandings and some odd use of power, like you're talking about. But, you know, we have this amazing capacity to create once we're aware of, you know, where we're creating from and why we're creating in the first place, you know, and that's.
I really do believe that horses are part of that journey for us. They have been with us from the beginning, and they've seen us use our less helpful, our less benevolent ways toward them, right? But we love them. Like, everybody loves horses. We all feel like they've been in service to us. So they might help us more than even how we treat each other, but how we treat them.
You know, there's something that illustrates how horses feel that to me so poignantly, and it is Da Vinci's paintings of war. Like, there's some drawings and sketches and paintings that Da Vinci did of people and horses in war, and look at the way he paints their faces. Like, I wish I had an example to just pull up, but if you go look it up and just look how he depicts the horse's response to war, it's not by mistake.
Wow.
You know, nothing that guy did was by mistake.
Right. I will definitely look that up.
Yeah.
Wow. This is awesome. And I'm looking down because I'm a mad note taker. So I'm taking notes so we can take some of these nuggets and share them later. So I might not be saying things on Sunday because I'm writing like mad. So I guess it's my turn. So it's this came up actually last night out of our conversation that we'd had last night about something else, but it was said that nature holds truth. Somebody made a comment that really jumped at me, is nature holds truth. So my question is, what truth do horses hold? Be a horse as one, or be a horse as the horse collective. What truth does nature hold, or do horses hold? There you go.
You want to start, Carrie?
Just playing with it right now. You know, of course, the linear mind tries to find some point in time or some definable response. But I think in general, truth is constantly in motion. And the truth is something we know when we encounter it and when we feel it. And so the words that come from my connection with horses that always, always, always point me toward the truth is, this is how it feels. They're always sharing, this is how it feels. And there's such a simplicity and a purity to it that if I'm willing to simply be with how it actually feels, then then I may encounter that feeling of truth amid other feelings, which might be very intense, you know, anxieties, pains, or even joy, you know, that can be so intense that you lose your mind. If I can still stay embraced, if I can let myself remain embraced by, this is how it feels, that's simplicity. It always opens the space for that grounding, relaxing beauty that we call truth. And from there, we can go anywhere together.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what's coming to mind for me isn't quite as profound as that. I love that. I could just sit with that. But one of the truths I think that horses have reminded me is, and a natural truth is that life is movement, right? That, even when we sit in the pastures and we just watch the horses, now occasionally if they're sleeping, they stand still, but mostly they're in movement. And even when they're standing still, parts of their body are in movement, right? And the natural world around them is movement. Like if you're outside, everything is just so alive, and it's because there's movement, right? And all of that movement is communication. And horses are aware of everything that's happening in the environment, and their hypervigilance isn't so because they're afraid. They use hypervigilance to say, oh, the birds are singing, it's okay. Oh, I recognize that sight over there, it's okay, right? It's like they use hypervigilance to calm themselves. And horses see motion, better than they see things that are still. So motion is both a warning thing, but also they just notice everything that's in movement. So they just remind me. And then there's their digestive systems that are always in movement, right? They're trickle feeders. So it's this constant passing of, things come in and we use what we need and then we pass out the rest, right? So I don't know, just that life is movement.
I love that too. That's gorgeous.
It's interesting you say that, and you said the birds are singing, and with my new puppy, we go out and we walk. And for some reason, we listen to the birds. She likes to chase them, but in the meantime, we listen to the birds. And sometimes they can be a cacophony of like different birds and everything. But it's never bothering. It's never a bothering sound. Whereas if I'm downtown in the city I live near, in the metropolis, that sound is like, what? It's just overload. But nature is never, I don't find nature is ever an overload of sound, even though there can be a whole lot of sounds. I know we're getting off horses there, but it's still, this nature it just never tends to be that overload of sound. Yeah. So for me, with the truth they hold for me, and actually by asking this question and then just now thinking of the answer, it sort of brought everything together. And it's like everything is love. And I'm going to take this maybe away that anyhow, I'm just going to take it where it goes, but everything is love. Fear is love. Fear is love for myself. To true and honest, authentic fear is love for the self and setting that boundary that I'm in danger and I want to look after myself. Whereas if we are that we have that inauthentic fear, which is actually vulnerability, and that is love. So if we took everything is actually love. And for me, when I go to the horses, there's nothing but love. They might move away from me because they're just giving me information. It's up to me how I take that. It's up to me whether I get offended by it or I take that information and learn and go, oh yeah, maybe I am feeling a little bit grr today. And so it's like, they'll move away, but they never approach it without love. And to say that, and that's been a revelation for me, because I always said in life, there's love and fear, or love and hate. But it's all, and I'm going to bring this up, but even war is love demonstrated in an improper way. Because it's about a resource. It's about a religion. It's about something that I care about.
Well, you're absolutely right there. Like it's a dysfunctional expression of love. And it's the same thing that happens with horses when we create resource guarding situations. In the wild, grass is everywhere and air is everywhere. And there's I'm not saying there's never scuffles, but there's not a lot of true aggression in the wild horse scenarios. But you bring them into the domestic world where there's only a few hay piles that we have to share, or grain only comes out once a day, or my human who I love is only here at certain times, or they come with treats. Then we get resource guarding behavior, right? That becomes very sort of aggressive and defensive. It's not the natural way. but it maybe is expressed, as you said, from a place of a loving feeling initially. Interesting. I love that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Cool. All right.
We want to honor real quick. Fotini put something in the chat, and she
Yeah, I
said
was
she's
gonna look at
needs to
those.
go in a moment, but she wrote, "The horses have taught me that truth cannot be analyzed by the logic of mind, but rather something that can only be felt in the wholeness of mind, body, and spirit. It's a homecoming when the horses show us the way home to truth." So grateful for the horses, and thank you for the wonderful conversation. So thank you so much for being here, Fotini.
Excellent. Absolutely. And Pam has talked about that they carry the that Native Americans say that they horses carry the emotion of the planet.
Yeah, I love
That's
And they
beautiful.
keep it in motion. Speaking to horses are always in motion.
And movement, absolutely.
Energy
Yeah.
and motion.
Yeah.
They're such a perfect poem to complement humanity. The existence of horses is like the most poignant poem or a koan that you really have to spend time with to really hear what's there. Because it's all revealed in relationship, not intellect.
Yeah.
Right.
So we were talking about nature. Pam was talking about the cicadas, the song of the cicadas, but it's loud, but it's not jarring.
Right.
So we can hear it. You know, it's like the loon in Canada here. It's the loons, and in the summer you hear this. Yeah, some days you're out camping. If you're out camping, the loons are like keeping you up at night, but they're never.
It's very different than like a motor of a plane going over low or a really loud car or vehicle. It's not the same, right?
Exactly. So, all right.
Although I do have to say, I have to say this really quick. I spent a couple of days on Heron Island in the Great Barrier Reef off of Australia, and it is a thriving bird colony, and like literally tens of thousands of birds on an island that you can circumnavigate on foot in 45 minutes.
Oops. You are frozen, my friend.
To speak. Just taking it all in and saying, all right, you guys, I'm on your territory. This is amazing.
It's over me.
Anyway.
It's awesome.
So good.
Okay.
Very loud.
Kim, second question.
Oh, okay. So second question, maybe we've touched on this, I don't know, but maybe it'll trigger a little something different. But horses have been in service to humanity for so long, maybe by choice, maybe not, that's a debate. But I know there are many people, and I talk to many people who want to know, like, how best can we individuals and humanity be in service to the horses, or in service back to the horses? Like, what's the best way for us to do that?
That's a big one.
I think different people will have a different idea of what service is. To me, service is as simple as being honest with yourself, letting yourself transform and evolve internally. And so, you know, just the first place I go with that is let yourself be in love. Let the horses love you. Let your pets love you. Even if the humans around you don't quite understand how to engage the purity of love. Okay, can I let the trees love me? Can I let the horses love me? Can I receive their beauty? Can I let myself feel awe at the image of the running horse that I think Pam just put? That the image of the running horse is one of the oldest, deepest positive symbols. I don't really know what positive means in that context, but it definitely is moving for humans. Can I receive that beauty? Can I let myself gasp and have that? Thank you, Pam. What if something that simple is a service back to the horses by acknowledging their beauty, by feeling myself moved and changed by their very existence. And I know, I don't remember everybody's name, but Jamie is one of the filmmakers with This Mustang Life, and the film is called Wild Lands, Wild Horses. And it's magnificent. I hope everybody gets a chance to watch it, and they have a series going on beyond it. But one of the things I love, and I know when George and I watched it, George loved this too, they come from this perspective of how do we help the wild horses? Well, how do we help people fall in love? How do we help people fall in love with the horses? Because when people are in love, everything changes. And so sometimes that has to begin with allowing oneself to experience love. And if people are so jaded and so defended that all they want to do is go kill the other guy, who said something that seems different than me, well, can I then let the horses love me? Can I let the animals love me? Can I let the beauty of nature share its love with me? Can I receive that? And when I'm willing to walk in that attitude, that presence, others notice. It's inevitable. It's how it works, right? It's the design of things. And can I let myself be loved without defense so that others can walk next to me, and then together we can talk about the love, and we can say, you know what? I feel so much love for these horses. It reminds me I have this contact. I'm going to make a phone call, for example. Right? But it is that spaciousness that amplifies when we come together that lets clarity drop in so we can take effective action in the service of the welfare, the well-being, and the honor of horses and others.
At the end, as you were describing that, I was thinking you're describing how horses are in a herd, right?
I've had good teachers.
I love that answer, though.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gary. Linda.
Yeah, that's so many things on so many levels, though. Like, we can look at welfare, we can look at how we live, but one leads to the other. And as part of it is, for me, is like when I go back to that meditation and the horse said, trust us. And it talked about they do what they do, and we learn from what they do by just being themselves, living their best life. If we all lived our authentic best life, every one of us, the world would be a different place, and the horses would in turn live a different life. So does it go there where if I live my best life, then I'm being of service, because I'm only one person, but if each person does that, we become a collective, and then that collective changes the consciousness. So it is being of service to the horses by living that true, authentic, following that intuition, following that gut and heart, and living that best life. And then in turn, I go back to, if the horses are living free, then I can't think of the word. I don't want to use the word reflection, but it is a metaphor for me living free.
Mm.
And if I can feel that I live a free life, then, you know, they're going to do the same. But that boils down to, you know, there's a lot of ethics involved in that. And, you know, that's a really deep question, because there's a lot of ethics involved in that. Had a conversation recently with somebody that has, you know, hundreds and hundreds of acres, and the horses live on these hundreds of acres, and one horse is going through the death process. And are we willing to let the horses go through a natural death process that like they would in the wild?
Well, I think one of the things that's hard there is, even though her horses are living, and that there's still this sense of ownership. I own the land. I'm responsible for the horses. I have something. I think true freedom would be, we don't have any sense of responsibility for them. So I don't know, that it's very hard to untangle all of that, right?
See,
Absolutely.
what I love about that, Kim, like a lot of people, I think when you say just abolish all responsibility for the animals, the mind might go, well, then who's going to take care of them? Well, who's going to take care of them? The people who love them, you know? And it's then we're acting from love rather than obligation or fear of punishment or fear of loss. And it is a tremendous shift in perspective from what people have been used to, you know. And again, in the herd of horses, they're not looking out for each other because, you know, dad's going to kick their ass at the end of the day if they don't. You know, they're looking out for each other because that is what supports the good of the whole.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how nature organizes itself. And so it is, compassion or control,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And so it's baby steps for humanity because of such deep indoctrination in life by punishment, life by control, right? Life by fear and escape. So like, how do we be kind about that? And again, to not judge the darkness that has built the world that looks this way and that functions this way, but to see it and go, excellent. Well, let's see, that little part of the world might be the up and coming 2-year-old stallion who really isn't getting it and just seems to want to start a fight everywhere, even though it doesn't serve anything. How are we going to tell this guy, hey, knock it off? You know, how do we not excommunicate this one from the herd, but show him a different way?
Right.
Because he's here. So we got to do something, right?
Yeah.
Part of the community. Yeah.
Community. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, you know, oh, go ahead, Linda.
I was just wanted to catch Fontini's comment here, is that just saying something about the heeding the call of the horses to remember who we are, and in turn supporting them and who they are in their authenticity, moving outside of what we think we know about horses, and horses to show us who they are. Yeah, absolutely. Letting the horses guide us in their care. Yeah.
And we're fortunate now that there still are some wild horses, so that we can know what that model is. We need to be doing even more of studying it, because I don't think in humanity we even know what our natural model is, right? What's our wild model? It's not even there anymore, right? So it's harder to find your way back to it when it's not there.
Yeah. Well, and there may not be one model for humanity other than connection through the heart. You know, if that is the priority and that is what is common among us all, then can I go from how it feels rather than whether I'm defending my culture or promoting this or protecting that? Because when we are coming from what is common to us all, it takes all of life into account, and we can create 7 generations in mind.
Yeah. I come back to the as you're talking here, and it's that Rumi's poem about out in the field between beyond wrongdoing and right doing, I will meet you there. And my line to that is, and there were horses in the field.
Did you see the ponies?
Did you see the ponies in the field?
I'm sure they were there.
That's why we're meeting in the field.
Exactly.
But I go back to the conversation I have with somebody about the horse, they're allowing to go through the death process on its own and naturally, and just holding that space for it and grieving, because grieving's okay, and how they learned and how humanity learns that how we can help our own kind through the death process. And then that's quite, that palliative and all that, can be quite broken in places. And how can we learn to allow for and that natural process? So
we completely project our human emotions and fears around death on other animals. I mean, there's the one thing that every living being is going to experience. We all are going to experience death. It's all around us every day. It's in the natural world all over the place, but we're not, the natural world it's part of the way, right? There's still the survival. We're going to live while we're living, like we want to live. But we get really mixed up with when we start talking about death.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah.
All right, Carrie, last question.
What does it take for people to realize that they are actually included in the life of nature?
That's a great one.
It's one of my faves.
Yeah, I don't remember who, I think I've heard you say it, Carrie. I think it's been other places, but it's remembering that we are not visitors in nature, right? It's like stepping outside and we tend to think, oh, I'm going to go out in nature for a while, or, oh, I'm visiting this place. And it's like, no, this is home. This was home all along, right? We've been distracted by where we've been sidetracked, but no matter where we stay, nature is our home just as much as all of the rest of the natural world. We do forget.
Yeah, it's an embrace. It, to me, comes back to, this is how it feels. What does home feel like? And for a long time, people asked me, like, Carrie, where's home for you? And I would feel what they were talking about when they use that word, right? So here's this word, HOME, but then there's all these feelings that go along with the use of that word. And then they would say, I would look at them like, I have no idea what you're talking about, how to answer that question. And they'd say, well, what city? Or do you feel at home with your family? Do you feel at home with the horses or whatever? And where the best words that I found for it is, home is the place of no words. Home is where no words are necessary for us all to say, yes, there you are. Or I guess that's words, but
to feel
there's
that.
an irony here.
To feel it.
Bit of a paradox here. But that to me is what's common, right? So yeah, I could answer my own question, but I would like to hear you guys.
You just asked yourself a question.
Because it's my favorite question.
Yeah, you said you talked about home and the feeling. When I was going to a school for social entrepreneurs, and I was developing my horse touch life design, and we were coming up with taglines. We had a day that we were coming up with taglines, and so we were doing these exercises, and so in the end we presented these. And so I got up and I presented, and I said, horses guide us on the journey home. And every single person in that classroom went, there it is. So it's that feeling of every single person just took that breath. Mm-hmm. And that's where home is. Yeah. It's that space. So, what does it take to realize that we're part of nature? First of all, it's getting more and more often to be able to take that, to have that feeling. So being able to offer spaces where people can go, be it sitting in a field with a bunch of horses and just going, there it is, here I am. be it sitting with trees, be it hugging a tree, be it doing meditate, it's a movement. It's a movement of those people that are called by the horses to do, I'm going to say this work, but for want of a better word, but that are guided on this path to offer all of our different spaces. It's when there's not one way to do it, but I think that is the result that we're all looking for, is being able to, for people to go, there it is. You know, even Benjamin Zander, who's a leadership, but he does leadership with, he's a composer, or not composer, but a conductor. And he's a beautiful TED Talk, but he does exactly the same thing in that TED Talk. And he talks about classical music and how he's trying to make everybody love classical music. And he says, I want everybody to be able to listen to classical music and go, just like they do when they get home after a busy day, because they're home, and that feeling. So it's done in so many different ways, on so many different levels, by so many different people. We just need to build the movement more. We just need to make people, and then that feeling is nature. Mm-hmm. Like I think it's coming in and knowing that my cells and my energy are they are nature. I don't even necessarily have to be with a tree. I don't have to be in nature. We're all connected. And when I feel that way, I feel connected. So nature, being in nature helps that. But walking home after a busy day helps that too. Sitting with my puppy helps that. You know, like there's ways that I can have that feeling. And then, then I have that breath.
I love that idea that like we don't even actually have to, nature's within us, right?
Yes.
So we can access it anywhere. But I think another aspect of this might be that, you know, one ways we can do that, Carrie, is to stop doing some of the things that we do that separate us from that feeling. And I think one thing that I think is kind of unfortunate, happens in the horse world completely, is, you know, people believe they have to go through a lot of training to be able to be good with horses, or to know what to do with horses, or even to be safe with horses, right? Like there's just this idea, and we do it with nature. Like you have to be trained to be a naturalist to understand what's happening. You have to be a bird watcher and study all the birds and be able to name them and identify the calls. And we turn everything into this like mental exercise of becoming an expert so that we can do it. And it's, I think that's not to say that those things aren't great endeavors, but I think it's dangerous when we make it seem that nature is inaccessible, or having a relationship with animals or a relationship with nature. Doesn't matter if you don't know what any of the birds are, just notice. That one's blue. Ooh, that one makes a pretty sound. Like it doesn't matter. The birds, the animals don't care if we know their labels. Labels are our thing, right? Yeah. So it's just like opening. I think we have to help each other free our minds from this idea that you have to earn the right to be connected with.
Exactly. Like permission to know what you know, even if someone else teach it to you.
Permission to experience what you experience, right? Like we get so caught up that they're not even present with the experience because
this is how it feels. It feels like this.
That's a great question though, Carrie.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's our 6 questions.
Yeah, good ones. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, and George had a couple. Going back to death, sometimes we confuse what we perceive as death when it's actually a metamorphosis.
Yeah, people don't see that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I guess to what Kim was saying, it's the difference between knowledge and wisdom, the intellect versus the experience.
Yeah.
That what you mean, George?
So does anybody else that is here, let's just open the table up that we've gone through our questions. Anybody have any, like to come off mute and have any comments, maybe have any questions? Since we are in this Zoom world at the moment, we can do that.
And thank you all for being here. I've loved seeing the faces that I can see and the names and knowing the energies with us today.
Yeah. comments, questions, thoughts? Pat?
There, I'm not great on Zoom.
Button.
You know, it kept hitting me over and over again as I was listening to the questions and the answers, which were wonderful. But through the truth, the movement, the feeling, all of that, for me, it's even under all of that. It's that there is a stillness and a quietness and a total lack of left brain thought when I'm watching horses or playing with them or whatever. And even though they're moving constantly, there's a deep, deep stillness. And that's what I connect to, is that stillness where, Carrie, I think it was you that said that nothing else existed because it's all there. Anyways,
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you. I'm not
Thank you, Pat.
articulating that but I'm sensing that you guys know exactly what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
That's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Even as you were talking, I was thinking about it's stillness, but there's also, like we were talking about life as movement. There's even stillness within the movement, right? Is it
Yes.
stillness of maybe it's just stillness of thought. I don't know, but it's stillness. Yeah.
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 And it encapsulates everything, but there's no encapsulation. There's no boundary to it. you
Right.
know?
Right.
But
It
isn't that,
excludes,
sorry, go ahead, Kim.
just
Carrie, sorry.
excludes nothing. That's it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
But
It's
I
that
think interesting, you
being.
got back to the duality. But you've brought the duality together.
Mm.
We've been talking about duality and not seeing, or you're visiting that duality, but now you've taken, it sounds like the duality is actually,
Cohesive.
Yes. Yes.
yeah, you've taken movement and stillness and now they work together. They don't work apart. They actually work together now.
Yeah. And they're one and the same. Like you can get to that place where they are one and the same. Good, bad, evil, stillness, movement. It's all in there, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Interesting. Thank you, Pat.
Pat, you're so good on Zoom.
I wish I knew how to work it better.
Anybody else?
Karen.
Just want, I want to thank you all, but I have to go do a barn shift. So
Let's go to the barn, lucky.
I know, right? Couldn't get any better. So
Perfect
thank you
place.
all.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming, Karen. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Anybody else? George, do you have more wisdom for us?
Well, we're kind of on movement, and I don't know, I've been delving deep into Wu Wei, which is part of the Tao, and it basically means effortless action. So it's moving with instead of against. So it's or being in your environment and finding how to work your way through it. Example would be kind of when Carrie was here, we were having that major windstorm. We look out at the horses and they just got their butts to the wind. The wind's howling out at about 45, 50 miles an hour. And I want to go out there and do Lieutenant Dan on the top of the mast and just start screaming at God. And there's just that difference. It's like, wow, look at how the horses are handling the movement of 50-mile-an-hour winds. And those 50-mile-an-hour winds, they're just like, yeah, whatever. And the shelters are over there, they could shelter. And they're like, nope, we'll just put our butts to the wind. So I'm like, but I spent $10,000 on that shelter, goes put your butts in it. And they're like, no, we'll just put our butts to the wind. And they work their way through it. And they just are so, even in the chaos, they can be so subtle in how they work through what we perceive as chaotic nature, whether it be a windstorm or a flood or rapids or all of that. They just move with instead of against. And so much of us in humanity, we're moving against. We keep pounding our head against the wall. We got blood rolling down our forehead, and we keep pounding our head against the same wall. It's like, the wall ain't moving. Okay, let's find a different way. So there's just movement as nature moves is beautiful. And I think the more we embrace the natural movement, the better off we are in our own little world, whether we're in a box that we call our home, or we're on 5,000 acres that we call our home. If we enjoy, and it's like the bamboo swaying in the wind, or the difference between a sailboat and a powerboat. It's another example. So it's just, nature is beautiful, and the universe, and it's just, things work and eloquently. And if we get out of all the clutter between our ears and get into our heart space and get into our belly, get in my belly, that's where, trust your gut. Your gut feel is going to be a lot more honest than what's been pounded into your head through indoctrination and too many hours of watching the news. So trust your gut, trust your heart, move with nature, not against it.
And when do we start to feel that our movement is nature? Like when we get to, when we can let all that go, and then be able to, I remember as a child going to something, I have this vivid memory of my mom taking me to this dance thing, and I wasn't a dancer, but we had scarves and we were moving, and in my body, I must have been like 6, and in my body, I still remember that movement. And when we start to see ourselves as nature, can we start to move in that way that, I can sway like a tree, and I can stand on the street, and
Last week I was in, sorry, I got an itch in my eye. Last week I was in Vermont, working with some people and their ponies, and the whole thing was just, the whole way that unfolded and came about was so much from the heart. There was so much sincerity, and like, yeah, we're right here and we just really need help being okay with taking the next step. And it was simplicity and sincerity. And my experience, I was there as the guide and teaching things, but it felt completely harmonious. Like there was no work for me to do. I was technically working about 10 hours a day, but it literally felt like every next scenario was just being handed in front of me. And the way I was organized for the entire endeavor was very much like, okay, show me what's next. Show me what's next. Show me. And then always watching, how does it feel? What am I feeling? What can I speak to? What is happening? Right. And so very much like what George is saying, that's how all of us ended up going through things during the week. And when even just one person is organized that way, it creates such a wave and, a wake behind you where everybody's like, oh, that feels so much better, and like, it's easier. Wow. How do you do that? And then you go, I don't know. You have to just come along, but that's why, one individual organizing themselves for a relationship with the nature that they are, just one person at a time, makes a huge splash.
Absolutely. Because it feels good for everybody to fall in with that, right? It's just natural. But
because it's natural.
it's natural. The hierarchies we create are not natural, right? Even the fact that there's a teacher and there's everybody, we're all teaching, we're all learning all the time. That's how it should be. And then, you know, we have to earn a living. So there's the whole money thing and people get hired to play a role and all that. Like we make everything so complicated.
Of course, but see, even within that, okay, so let's just acknowledge there's all these complicated systems.
But we
Great.
still,
How can I bring my nature into it, acknowledging that if I like a roof over my head, then somehow there's going to have to be some dollars exchanged or numbers on a screen. It's not even dollars, it's numbers on a screen, you know? And so how can I not judge that? How can I move with that, you know? And it's just part of the journey of getting to know how my own nature moves if I exclude nothing. How does nature move through me if I exclude nothing?
Yeah, it's interesting. How does my own nature? We're talking about nature, but then we have our true nature. So it's the same word used,
Yeah.
but in sort of different way. We don't look at that like I say the word my true nature, but I don't always see, or we don't always see that as, oh, I am nature.
I think, yeah, people have not been guided to that perspective in a way that they can feel it for themselves. Again, it's how it feels like. It's just words until you're aware of having an experience in relationship to that word. Like my nature moves as me. I think there's so many times you can be speaking English and it sounds like Martian, even though, you know, it's just simple words, but it's about letting myself discover the relationship of the nature that is me, my nature. The only reason it's my is because I have this guy that individualizes everything. Anyway, it's a little bit deeper conversation. But
next one.
We could go there. It gets colorful, but it really is like, how do we assist people to recognize the feeling of, oh, and then give them the word for it and go, yeah, that's your nature. Oh. Wow. Just like in kindergarten, that's how we were indoctrinated in kindergarten. This is red, this is blue, this is a flower, that's good, that's bad, I approve, I disapprove. So can we come back and welcome forward, not even come back, but welcome forward that kindergarten heart that's just been sitting there going, well, this is weird, but okay, you know, and offer the relationship of that feeling right there. That's your nature. Yeah, there's space here for that. Come on, you're welcome.
Exactly.
You know?
Providing that space.
Yeah. Providing
that space, you know, that what we all do is providing that space where people can, for a brief moment in time,
or forever,
or brief moment in time to experiencing it, hoping that it will, you know, be able to take it back. And the more somebody can experience it and experience it again and again, that muscle grows.
Yes.
That natural muscle grows and it just becomes part of us. Beautiful. Yay. Any other thoughts or questions or closing remarks?
No. Just want to thank everybody. This was a wonderful conversation. I loved it.
Absolutely. And I will hand it to both of you for closing remarks and something to wrap this up in a beautiful bow.
Just thank you. The conversation doesn't happen unless people want to hear it.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise it stays kind of in a vacuum. And I am so in love with how many people there are in this conversation in different flavors all around the planet now. So thank you to all of us, and thank you to all of you, and thank you to everybody that you're going to touch when you go out into the world, vibrating with your own nature. And we'll look forward to the next time we dance together. And absolutely. Linda, thank you for the inspiration and the organizing. And Kim, thank you for being here and playing and sharing your beautiful beauty. Thank you guys. I'm so honored to be among you.
Absolutely. And Kim?
I don't think I can add anything to what Carrie did. That was a beautiful closing. I loved it. And other than Linda, I want to thank you again too, because this wouldn't have happened without you. This was Linda's idea. And
Oh.
thank you everyone who's here, because yeah, it does just expand the conversation, and I love that.
Excellent. Well, we'll do it again because I've got somebody that wants to do another one. So I will need, we need 3 people. So if anybody knows somebody that would like to join another one, I have one lady willing to step in, and we will do it again. I think this will be, again, a way to bring out, just keep talking. Just keep talking. Yeah. So thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Who are you?
Well, this was gushing from the heart. That's
Oh, feeding. Anyhow, have a great night. I'm going to put this, we recorded this, so we'll put it on our YouTube channel, and I'll put it all over the place. And thank you. Have a wonderful weekend.
Bye.
Blessings,
Bye.
everybody. Bye. Oh, nobody saved. Okay.